There are a few different versions of narcissism. It comes from the word Narcia, who used to be a mythological figure in the Greek world. Narcia, he was cursed in the sense that when he was born, and one of the things you need to understand about the world of mythology is that different texts, different books, different authors kind of say different things about a certain figure. So since all of us have no choice but to be biased, I'm going to use the version that best suits me and my agenda and my ways of thinking. So the versions that I have read and I've enjoyed very much are Narcia is a kid who was born cursed. He always wanted to kind of see and understand how he looks and why he looks the way he looks. But every time he saw his own reflection, he came to realize that they're unclear, and he can be certain that the reflection of himself is in fact the one that is real. So he goes on this quest for his entirety of life, going from person to person, pond to pond, pools of water, to see whether or not he can figure out who he is and what he looks like. At last, he finds this pool of water. It has some ripples, but unlike all the other things that he has experienced, it's not as fierce. So he just sits there and patiently for the ripples or the waves to go away, and eventually it does. And then once the water is calm, he begins to see the way he looks, and he falls in love with himself. And one of the things about narcissism is that there is something about you that says, I like myself. But more than that, I love myself. Now, you can have an 18-year-old saying, I love Johnny. But this particular love has no examination behind it, no reflection behind it. It hasn't been pushed and tested by life. And so the 18-year-old is willing to sacrifice everything. Their life, their body, their money, their time, their energy. And of course, after 2-3 years, as most of us are, experienced about this stuff, you come to realize that the other person betrayed you betrayed you, everybody else betrayed you, and now you're just profoundly bitter. The other forms of narcissism is that I say to you, you look good. So you're like, okay, thank you. But deep down, you have a good amount of doubt. What if Amir is lying to me? And it's one of the things that Jean-Paul Sartre mentioned to us, which is he wrote a play called No Exit. And in the play, it's about, all of us in this class. Are you going to her saying, so how do I look? You look great. You ask him, how do I look? And he says, you look great. But deep down, you know that people can't be trusted. You know that people lie all the time. And though she's praised you, and so even though he's praised you and everyone else in this class has praised you, there is this hint of doubt that lives inside you. What if they're all wrong? And so you go on this quest to find someone who can give you an unvarnished reflection of you. And you do so because you are self-involved, because you are self-centered. And it's a good way of being, because you no longer trust books, you no longer trust assumptions, you no longer trust advertisements. It needs to, and you basically what you want to do is you want to tap into your intuition, but not the intuition of an 18-year-old. An intuition of a 50 or a 60-year-old man or woman who has been around, has been tested, has been beaten, has been able to kind of get themselves up and go on the quest again, only later on to find certainty. You can find a good amount of clear reflection. And that's where the word narcissism comes about, narcia. And once you find this unvarnished reflection of yourself, that's where your Garden of Eden is. That's where home is. You rest. That becomes your Sabbath. Even if I was to come to you and say, you're an idiot, that's fine. I know who I am. And remember, this idea that I know who I am, it's not coming from an 18-year-old. Someone who is seasoned, someone who knows. The idea that you have, for example, the Gospel of John, in which he says, I am about almost 50 times. Slap me on the right cheek, I'll offer you the left. When you say I am, it's such an amazing thing. 18-year-old says, I am in love. Well, just give it some time, give it some space, give it some air, give it some history. And then you say, no, I think I was wrong. The I am shifts from I love to I hate to I am indifferent. I will never again love. That's the instability of when you're young and unexperienced and untrained and unseasoned. When you're, for example, 60 and you've gone through 4 or 5 marriages, or maybe just one marriage, and you've really been tested in that marriage, You know what pain is, you know what betrayal is, you know what conflict is, you know what compromise is. So when you say, I know marriage, I am the embodiment of marriage, it means that there is something about you that is fundamentally crystallized. It remains unchanged. Remember, we have two forms of narcissism. The first thing you need to understand is the moment every infant comes about, the first thing they do, they scream. They don't really care about the fact that the parents have gone through hell the past 9 months, especially the woman, the last 4 months of her pregnancy. She can't sleep, she can't eat, she's always nauseous, irritable. Life is tough on her. Her body is changing, she's hormonal. Now, the infant doesn't care about any of that. Comes out screaming, I want to be nursed, I want to be held. So narcissism starts at a very, very, very young age. And you remain self-important for a long time because your desires are untested, unexamined. You're unreflective. Everything you believe in, you assume, you think to be relevant, important, valuable. And that could last till the time you die. There is another kind, which is you think very highly of yourself from the moment of birth, and then life happens. Something happens to you where you're beaten down, you get depressed. We went through the 5 stages, which is you deny that you're not great because you continuously want to believe that you are in fact great. So you kind of deny all the realities that are being shoved in your face. Say, no, that can't be true, I'm still great. But there comes a point where you can no longer deny that you're a douchebag, that you're an idiot. And what happens, it makes you really, really angry because for the first time, you're faced with the reality of who you are. There is no longer denying it. You don't have the power to deny it. It's kind of like an alcoholic. I mean, it's interesting the way things begin. Life is tough. You don't have the proper tools to kind of deal with the difficulties of life. And, you do what you can to kind of numb the pain. It's just too much responsibility, being married, paying rent, having a job, your body being tired. Everything is just against you. And so you take some alcohol and it feels good, you forget. And, because life puts you in prison, and the spirit that lives in alcohol gives you wings and you are removed from the prison of life. And as your assumptions about the freedom alcohol gives you becomes bigger and more inflated, you begin to consume more. And your wife tells you, honey, you're drinking too much. Honey, you're screaming at the kids too much. You say, no. Then your mom says, are you an alcoholic? You just have the smell to you. And you keep denying it for many, many, many years, as most of us do. I mean, we are all intoxicated by some things. It doesn't need to be alcohol. It could be stupidity, it could be porn, it could be video games, it could be, technology, whatever the case may be. And so when you can no longer deny reality, you become very angry because you realize you're kind of held hostage by it. And not only do you begin to have some very harsh judgments about yourself, other people begin to judge you harshly as well. And there's a part of you that accepts the judgments. There's a part of you that wants to get rid of the judgments. So there's a good amount of anger. There are moments of innocence where you receive. There are moments of you just being completely villainous, where you want to kind of just destroy everyone who judges you, including yourself. There comes a point in the 3rd stage where you say, okay, instead of drinking 7 days out of the week for about 5 hours, and when I drink, I become very mean to everyone, I'll just drink 2 days out of the week. That's how you begin to bargain with your intoxication with anything. But you realize it doesn't work. You just have to kind of completely cut away from the thing that has poisoned you. And going from 7 days to 2 days, it's just not going to work at all. Eventually, you're going to go back being a 7-dayer. There comes a point you realize, and remember, it requires a good amount of will. You have to summon up the courage. You have to see things about yourself that will make you profoundly angry so that you'll be inspired to change, which is almost impossible. Change is really, really, really difficult. And for any one of us in this class who want to change, but you find it difficult, always go back to the great sages of humanity, whether it's Gilgamesh or the Buddha or Jesus. None of these folks were able to find a single disciple, a single student, because every student ultimately goes back to being who and what they've always been. So a teacher can inspire, but they can't inspire change long-term. They can inspire change short-term, For example, they can come to this class, I can inspire reflection, but the moment this class ends, life catches you, captures you, and devours you. End of it. No more reflection. What happens when you realize you keep trying and you keep failing? You get really, really depressed. So, and this is again going back to your question about, someone being a narcissist, and if it's a good narcia to have or a bad narcia to have. If someone has gone through these stages, they've come to realize that they were addicted to themselves. Life kind of tells them, no, you're not that great. Then they realize they're not that great. They become angry. And then they think that they can overcome their narcissism by simply reading a couple of books. That's how they bargain, but they fail. But now they know too much about themselves. Now they get really depressed because despite all the things that they have done, they go back to being, the sort of scumbag they've always been. If they're able to get themselves out of depression, and that requires a good support system. Support system in the way that someone needs to take their physical body, puts them in another environment where they're being advertised a different set of ideas until they become addicted to those sets of ideas. Then they will simply accept the fact that this is their past. They used to be a narcissist, but in all the wrong ways, but now they are narcissists in an educated way. You can't find a more inflated sense of self than the Gospel of John, Jesus Christ. Before Abraham, I was. I am God. I am light. I am bread. I am this. I am that. How could someone love themselves so much? It's because they know. And that knowing does not change. Always remain constant. Sure, you catch him once in a while in doubt, but for the most part. So when you talk about someone being a narcissist, the question is, are they being a narcissist in a good way or a bad way? Examined way or an unexamined way?